My best friend Tessa suddenly stopped talking to me, and I eventually found out it was because my dad had fallen in love with his marriage counselor, who turned out to be Tessa's mom, Dr. Marlene. When everything blew up, they showed up at the pizza place where I worked, out on a date. I had to serve them while my mom was quietly putting together a revenge folder full of evidence that eventually got Dr. Marlene's therapy license suspended and completely wrecked both our families. But Tessa and I secretly rebuilt our friendship using burner phones while our parents' lives unraveled. I still remember the exact moment my mom told me I couldn't see Tessa anymore. Tessa had been my best friend since second grade. We were glued to each other. We'd worn each other's underwear and borrowed socks without blinking. Once on a family vacation, there was only one bathroom, so I showered while she brushed her teeth, and it didn't feel awkward at all. She was like the sister I never had. So when she started ignoring me, it was a massive red flag. For 2 weeks, I called her house, but nobody answered. Her mom used to drive us to dance class every Tuesday, but that just stopped. At school, Tessa started sitting with the theater kids, even though she couldn't stand drama class. When I walked up to her locker, she turned and left like I wasn't even there. The person who knew all my secrets, who I told everything to, was acting like I was invisible. None of it made sense. We'd been totally fine just a few days earlier. I kept replaying our last sleepover in my head, trying to figure out if I'd said something wrong or done something unforgivable without realizing it. My dad was acting weird too. He was barely home anymore. He had evening therapy sessions twice a week, plus extra weekend appointments. My mom spent most nights on the couch watching cooking shows with a glass of wine in hand. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was stiff and formal like strangers playing house. School turned into absolute misery after that. Tessa's new group started calling me names in the hallways. Someone slipped a note into my locker that said my family was disgusting. I had no clue what they meant, but it made me feel sick to my stomach. Teachers noticed I was sitting alone at lunch and kept checking in to see if I was okay. I lied and said yes. What else was I supposed to say when I didn't even know what was going on myself? That summer was the loneliest 3 months of my life. I saw Tessa at the town carnival with her sister, but when I waved, she looked straight through me. My hand just froze mid-air like an idiot while my heart cracked in half. Her mom saw me once at the grocery store and deliberately switched checkout lines to avoid me. My parents fought constantly behind closed doors, but pretended everything was normal when I was around. 7th grade began, and nothing had changed except now Mom had book club 4 nights a week, even though I never saw her crack open a book. Dad said work was crazy, but his laptop stayed shut on the desk. We ordered takeout nearly every night and ate in different rooms. The whole house felt empty, even when everyone was technically home. I missed how things used to be so badly it hurt, so I turned into a full-on detective. I kept notes in a purple notebook, every weird thing I noticed. Dad would leave for appointments but come back without his therapy workbook. Mom cried in her car after dropping me off at school. There were whispered phone calls that ended the second I walked into the room. I felt paranoid, but I didn't care. I needed to figure out what the hell was happening. The first real clue came from Tessa's cousin, Noah, who sat next to me in science class. He mentioned his family was caught up in drama too, and that our situations were connected. When I asked what he meant, he gave me this nervous look and muttered that his mom would kill him for talking to me. But then he added that it was the adults who screwed up, not us. That was when things started clicking. Dad had been seeing Dr. Marlene for marriage counseling since the spring. She was Tessa's mom, and my mom had thought it was great since we already knew her. When Mom traveled for work, which happened often, Dad went to therapy alone. He always seemed happier after those sessions, and Mom took that as a sign that the therapy was working. But this gross feeling started creeping up inside me as everything began falling into place. Looking back, there had been so many signs. Dad had started dressing nicer for his appointments. He bought new cologne, but only wore it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I once found a receipt in his car for a fancy lunch downtown at a time he was supposedly in therapy. 2 entrees, 2 drinks. Everything snapped into focus at the winter band concert. My choir was performing and Tessa played clarinet, so both our families had to be there. It was the first time we'd all been in the same space since spring. I was trying to find Mom after the show when I saw Dad talking to Dr. Marlene near the exit doors. The way they stood together made my stomach twist. They weren't doing anything technically wrong, but the energy between them was off too close, too intense. Mr. Marlene appeared with Tessa and her sister the second he saw Dad and Dr. Marlene together, and his expression turned ice cold. He walked over, and whatever he said made Dad go pale. Dr. Marlene looked like she wanted to vanish. Mr. Marlene, her husband, led his family out without another word. Tessa looked back at me once, and the expression in her eyes wasn't anger, it was pity. And somehow, that felt even worse. That night, I sat on the stairs and listened while my parents fought for real this time. No more hushed arguments or tiptoeing around each other. Mom kept demanding to know how long it had been going on. Dad insisted nothing physical happened during the therapy sessions. Mom's voice cracked when she asked if he loved her. He didn't answer. The silence dragged out so long I thought maybe they were done. Then Mom started sobbing. Not the quiet kind, the raw, choking kind that made my chest ache. Dad tried to explain that Dr. Marlene just understood him in a way Mom never could. That made her cry even harder. My hands were shaking as I hit record on my phone. The screen jittered while I captured Dad admitting he had feelings for Dr. Marlene, repeating over and over that nothing physical happened during their sessions, as if saying sessions made everything fine. Mom wasn't buying it. She screamed at him to get out to pack his things and leave that night. My legs were numb from crouching on the stairs, but I didn't move. I heard Dad's footsteps heading toward the bedroom. Mom followed, still shouting about betrayal, broken trust, and how he could destroy their family like this. I crawled back to my room and hid in the closet, peering through the crack as Dad shoved clothes into a duffel bag. He grabbed his work shirts, the new cologne, his laptop, nothing else. Like this had all been prepped in advance. The front door slammed. His car engine started. Mom's crying quieted, but didn't stop. I stayed curled up in that closet for an hour, knees pulled to my chest, trying to understand what had just shattered around me. My dad had feelings for my best friend's mom, his therapist. Suddenly, everything made horrible, undeniable sense. Around midnight, Mom found me. She opened the closet door and saw me huddled there, still clutching my phone. Her face was blotchy and red. She didn't say a word, just sat down next to me on the closet floor. And we cried. Her tears soaked my pajama top. Mine fell onto her shoulder. The house felt different already, like something vital had gone with Dad when he walked out. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed, a message from Tessa. My mom told me everything. I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Part of me wanted to write back instantly, but my fingers wouldn't move. Instead, I took a screenshot, then deleted the message. I couldn't handle it yet. I lay awake wondering when Tessa had found out. Was it just after the concert? Or had she known for weeks while I was desperately trying to figure out why she'd shut me out? Morning came too fast. Mom called us both in sick me from school, herself from work. We sat at the kitchen table eating stale cereal without saying anything. From down the street, the church bells rang, announcing Sunday service. We used to go together sometimes. Dad would grumble about waking up early, but he'd still put on his nice shoes and take us. Those quiet Sunday mornings felt like they belonged to another life. The doorbell startled us both. Mom peeked through the peephole and her whole posture stiffened. She cracked the door open just enough. Mr. Marlene was standing on our porch holding Dad's golf clubs. He didn't meet Mom's eyes, just muttered something about returning them. As he turned to leave, he whispered, "I'm sorry about your family." So quietly I almost didn't hear it. Mom shut the door and leaned against it like it was the only thing holding her up. The rest of the morning, she was on the phone with divorce attorneys. From my room, I could hear her calm, steady, professional, as she explained everything. Meanwhile, I sat cross-legged on my bed with my laptop, Googling emotional affairs therapy ethics violations, clicking through article after article. Apparently, therapists absolutely aren't supposed to develop feelings for their clients. There are guidelines, serious ones. Licenses can be suspended or revoked. My stomach flipped as I realized just how much trouble Dr. Marlene could be in. My phone lit up with a text from Dad. "This is between adults. Focus on school," like I could just pretend my world hadn't imploded, like I was supposed to care about algebra homework when my entire family was unraveling. I chucked the phone across the room. It hit the wall and the case popped off. I didn't bother picking it up. From downstairs, Mom's voice spiked. She'd found something on the credit card statement, a hotel charge from 2 months ago. The same day Dad claimed he had a late therapy session. She was practically yelling into the phone at whoever she'd called. I pressed a pillow over my head, but I could still hear her through the fabric. It was too quiet when she finally stopped. I found myself in the living room, holding the house phone before I even realized what I was doing. My fingers dialed Tessa's number from memory. 1 ring, 2. Then Mr. Marlene answered. His voice was gentle but firm when he recognized me. "Please don't call here again," he said, not unkind, just exhausted. Then the line went dead. I collapsed to the floor and sobbed until my ribs hurt. Full body, breath-stealing crying that echoed through the empty house. No Dad, no Tessa, just me, Mom, and this awful new normal. Monday didn't care that we weren't ready. School happened anyway. I kept my head down in the hallways, but I could feel the stares. There's something so strange about how the adults let the kids sit in silence while the fallout swallowed everything. Why did we have to pay for their mess? The way Tessa's mom kept seeing my dad for therapy, even when it was obviously crossing the line, it made my skin crawl. During third period, Mrs. Patel pulled me out of class. She was the school counselor, the one everyone said was kind and wore a little silver cross around her neck. She walked me to her office with a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Your teacher said you seemed upset," she said as she settled into her chair. "Is everything okay at home?" I stared at the cheesy posters behind her desk. One had a kitten clinging to a tree branch. "Hang in there." I almost laughed at how ridiculous it looked. Instead, I lied. Said I was just tired from staying up late studying. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she let me go back to class anyway. The rumors had already started. Tessa's new theater crowd whispered when I walked past. Heads turned. Someone knew something. Maybe Tessa told them. Maybe their parents worked at Dr. Marlene's office and overheard gossip. Small towns never keep secrets for long. At home, Mom had gone into full investigator mode. She'd printed out pages about dual relationships and ethics board regulations. "She could lose her license," Mom muttered, waving the papers in front of me. There was a wild gleam in her eyes, like she'd found ammunition. Tuesday was worse. I found Tessa crying in the girls' bathroom during lunch. Our eyes met in the mirror, and for 1 second I thought she might speak. But instead, she darted out the door so fast she left her backpack behind. I just stood there staring at it, recognizing the dolphin keychain I'd given her for her birthday. Wednesday brought fresh disaster. Dad showed up in the school pickup line, even though Mom had specifically told him not to. I spotted his car from the library window, and my stomach dropped. He waved for me to come over. I shook my head. He got out of the car. Other parents began noticing. I ran back inside and hid in the nurse's office until Mom arrived. The principal scheduled a meeting for Thursday. Both my parents had to attend. We sat in those hard plastic chairs while they pretended the other didn't exist. The principal talked about student wellness, offered pamphlets and school resources. Mom brought up the ethics complaint she was considering. Dad went sheet white. Nothing got resolved except now the school knew everything too. Friday afternoon, Mom met with a divorce lawyer. Dad joined by speakerphone, which totally defeated the point of keeping them separate. From my bedroom, I could hear Mom's voice, clipped and furious, rattling off timelines and terminology dual relationships, confidentiality breach, documented evidence. She'd already started the case file. Dates, screenshots, charges, receipts. It was all real now. That night, I was scrolling through TikTok when I saw it. Tessa had posted a video with text overlay. "When you lose everything because adults can't control themselves." The comments were already piling up. Someone wrote, "Your mom's a homewrecker." Another said, "I heard about this at my aunt's job." 500 views in just a few hours. Our private disaster had become public entertainment. My phone started buzzing with texts from classmates. Some messages were kind, others just nosy. A few people had already picked sides. Most were blaming Dr. Marlene. One said, "Your dad's disgusting for falling for his therapist." Another called my mom pathetic for not figuring it out sooner. I turned off my phone, but the damage was done. By Saturday, Dad had moved into Riverside Apartments. 3 kids from school lived there. I saw his car every day on the way home, like a blinking reminder that things would never go back to how they were. Mom helped the only way she knew how, by not helping. She made him pack everything himself, standing nearby to document what he took for the lawyers, she said. By Sunday, she'd pulled me into the process. "When did your dad start acting different? Can you remember any specific days he dressed up or came home late? Were there signs?" I felt like a witness in a trial I never agreed to be part of. When I finally said I didn't want to write down any more evidence, she snapped that I was taking Dad's side. "I'm not taking sides," I told her. "I just want it to stop." But it wasn't stopping. It was only just beginning. Word spread through the parent network. Dr. Marlene had taken a leave of absence from her practice. Both families were suddenly tight on money. Dad was covering rent for his new apartment and still paying his share of our mortgage. The Marleens were down to one income. The financial pressure added even more weight to an already crushing situation. Mom spent every night building timelines and collecting evidence. I spent most nights hiding in my room. The house felt like a battlefield where I wasn't just a civilian, I was also being drafted, expected to survive, expected to pick a side. Outside, the world kept spinning like nothing had happened. Inside, everything had been ripped apart. The parent network stayed busy. Mom's book club turned into a war council. Her friend group started splitting. Catherine, Mom's closest friend for years, made some excuse about needing to leave early on Tuesday. By Thursday, Mom got a text saying she was no longer welcome in the group at all. She threw her wine glass at the kitchen wall. I swept up the shattered pieces while she sat at the table, face buried in her hands. Dad started showing up at my basketball games, suddenly acting like my biggest fan. He'd never cared much about sports before, but now he was at every practice, clapping too loud, grinning too wide. Mom came too, sitting on the opposite side of the gym. The other parents noticed. The awkward energy was impossible to miss. In the locker room, my teammates started asking questions I didn't want to answer. After 2 weeks, I quit the team. I didn't want to be their battleground. Then came the chemistry class nightmare, alphabetical seating. That's how I ended up as lab partners with Tessa. We went the entire period without speaking, just measuring, mixing, recording data. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. She was still wearing the friendship bracelet we'd made at camp the summer after 4th grade. Mine was in a jewelry box at home, tucked away like a relic. Seeing hers made my throat tighten. We both wore latex gloves, but our hands still found ways to avoid touching when we passed beakers or shared tools. Meanwhile, Mom's obsession with documentation hit a new level. She used the family calendar, credit card records, and text messages to build a complete timeline of Dad's therapy sessions. The dining room table disappeared beneath a sea of color-coded sticky notes, red for confirmed sessions, yellow for suspicious charges, green for the nights Dad claimed to be working late. She stayed up until 3 a.m. most nights, cross-referencing receipts and phone logs. When Dad's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter accusing her of harassment and defamation, she laughed. One of those dry, bitter laughs, and added the letter to her growing evidence folder. She'd started sleeping with that folder under her pillow, convinced Dad might try to steal it. I caught her checking the window locks twice before bed. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for a glass of water and found her hunched over her laptop, scrolling through Dr. Marlene's professional website and LinkedIn profile. She'd printed screenshots of every certification, every headshot, every client testimonial. She stared at the printer like it had personally betrayed her. The printer ran out of ink, and Mom actually drove to the 24-hour pharmacy at 3 a.m. just to buy more. The school dance was coming up, the one Tessa and I had been planning for since September. We'd picked out matching accessories and practiced dance routines in her basement. Now neither of us would be there. I donated my dress to the thrift store rather than let it hang in my closet, mocking me every time I opened the door. Dad invited me out for pizza the following Saturday, saying he wanted to check in. He picked me up in his car, the same one that still reeked of the cologne he'd bought for his therapy sessions. Over greasy slices of pepperoni, he tried small talk about school and friends. Then he slipped. He started talking about how Dr. Marlene had helped him understand himself, how she saw parts of him no one else ever had. The words poured out like he'd been waiting for someone to say them to. I shoved my plate away and asked him if tearing apart 2 families was worth being understood. The question just hung there, thick and heavy. His face crumpled, and then he admitted it. He was in love with her. The confession startled him almost as much as it did me. Other diners glanced over as I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out, leaving him with the check and 2 barely touched pizzas. Mom retaliated by changing the passwords on every streaming account and canceling the credit cards Dad was still using. She did it the night of his favorite show's season finale. He called the house phone 17 times. We didn't answer. My grandparents arrived that weekend, allegedly to provide support. Instead, they made things worse. They gave outdated advice about forgiveness and working things out. Grandma said Mom should have been more attentive to Dad's needs. Grandpa suggested maybe Dad just needed a hobby. They lasted 2 days before Mom, still polite but very firm, asked them to leave. I started hiding out at the library after school. It was the only neutral space left, where I didn't have to pretend everything was okay or pick a side. One afternoon, I saw Tessa there too. We sat at different tables for 2 hours, pretending to study while sneaking glances at each other. Neither of us said a word, but we stayed until closing. Mom's evidence folder kept growing. She found Dad's therapy notebook tucked into a drawer in his home office, something he'd forgotten to pack. Page after page, he wrote about his feelings for Dr. Marlene. His handwriting got worse as the entries went on, like his emotions were spilling out faster than he could contain them. Mom photographed every single page before filing the notebook into her growing archive. The holidays loomed like an oncoming train. Both families' plans collapsed. The annual neighborhood Christmas party left both our houses off the invitation list. Thanksgiving turned into a scheduling disaster. Who had me when, who got which days. The decorations never left the attic. No one felt like celebrating. Mr. Marlene filed a formal complaint with the State Therapy Board. The investigation into Dr. Marlene's license was officially underway. Mom heard about it through the parent network, and for the first time in weeks, she actually smiled. She added the complaint number to her timeline with a fluorescent pink sticky note. Through Tessa's cousin, I learned that she had known for months. She'd tried to warn her mom that my dad seemed too emotionally attached, that things didn't feel appropriate. But Dr. Marlene brushed it off as transference, said it was normal for therapy, that it would resolve with time. Tessa watched her mom linger after sessions, stay late to talk, dress differently on days when Dad had appointments. When Dad learned about the investigation, he panicked. He called Mom, offering to walk back his earlier statements, said he'd tell the board it was all one-sided, just a misunderstanding. Mom recorded the call and added it to her evidence stack. She started making backup copies of everything USB drives, printouts, and stored them in a safety deposit box at the bank. The library became our shelter. Tessa and I were assigned a project on Julius Caesar, which felt painfully ironic. Betrayal, loyalty, consequences. Working together cracked something open. In a quiet corner behind the reference shelves, we finally talked. We whispered about how much we missed each other, about how our parents' selfishness had stolen what we had. We compared notes on all the lies we'd been fed, the signs we'd ignored, the way adults could destroy everything while insisting it was for our protection. Presentation day came. We delivered a fierce, carefully worded speech about how betrayal doesn't just wound the betrayer, and the betrayed it crushes everyone stuck in the wreckage. We used Caesar and Brutus as metaphors so thinly veiled our teacher shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The class applauded, but the clapping felt distant, like noise from another room. The local newspaper picked up the story once Dr. Marlene's ethics investigation became public record. The headline on page 3 read, "Prominent Therapist Faces Ethics Probe." Our family names were barely altered. Mom bought 10 copies. Dad tried to file a restraining order against the reporter. Suddenly, both families were the town's favorite scandal. I couldn't buy milk at the corner store without the cashier giving me a pitying look. One evening, Dad showed up at the house claiming he wanted to work things out. He stood on the porch holding flowers, looking smaller than I remembered him. Mom hesitated, maybe for 30 seconds before catching the scent of his cologne, the same one he'd worn to therapy. She slammed the door in his face. He left the flowers on the porch. They rotted there. Eventually, Mom agreed to let him move back in, but only for financial reasons. The mortgage and his apartment were bleeding both their bank accounts dry. Before he brought in a single box, she installed a lock on her bedroom door. They slept in different rooms and spoke only through text, even when they were in the same house. I caught her in the laundry room one night, folding his shirts like they were toxic. Eyes puffy, jaw tight. The Marlenes were trying their own version of reconciliation. Mr. Marlene had moved into the basement, and they kept up appearances for the sake of public image. Tessa told me her parents only spoke when arranging joint appearances. They'd show up to events together but always drove separately. Everyone could see through it. I learned both families were coordinating these appearances for legal optics and professional reputation. They posed together at parent-teacher conferences, smiled politely at assemblies, stood side by side for the yearbook camera at the spring fundraiser. It was a performance, nothing more. Behind closed doors, the war raged on. When the spring musical cast list went up, Tessa got the lead. I had been slated to stage manage. Neither of us could stomach the idea of pretending everything was fine, so we both quit. The drama teacher begged us to stay, but some things weren't worth salvaging. Then an anonymous email landed in Mom's inbox, screenshots of Dr. Marlene's communication with other clients. There was nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the patterns were clear. Extended sessions, personal email exchanges, blurry lines. Mom forwarded everything to the ethics board without hesitation. I recognized Tessa's writing in the observations, carefully phrased, precise. She was trying to help without directly betraying her mom. We met secretly in the park to talk it through, renewing our alliance in the shadow of the same playground where we'd spent half our childhoods. We sat on the swings we used to plan our futures on. Now, we were strategizing how to survive our present. Our parents found out through Find My Phone. We were grounded indefinitely. Honestly, the punishment felt like a gift. A legitimate reason to skip school dances, friend group drama, the landmine hallway encounters. House arrest was safer than facing classmates who didn't know what to say, or worse, said the wrong thing. The state therapy board confirmed they would be interviewing Dr. Marlene's other clients as part of standard procedure. 3 families came forward, raising concerns about blurred boundaries, no glaring violations, but a definite pattern. It was enough to establish a precedent. Mom logged the update in her master timeline with grim satisfaction. Dad finally cracked during a mediation session. He confessed the physical relationship had begun 2 weeks before the winter concert, before Mr. Marlene had discovered anything. They'd tried to stop, he claimed, but the emotional connection was too strong. Mom had her phone recording in her purse the whole time. The mediator didn't notice. The recording violated state laws about consent, but at this point Mom didn't care about technicalities. The divorce papers were served the following Tuesday. After months of forced cohabitation and fake reconciliation, she finally pulled the trigger. Dad was at work when the process server arrived. His assistant called to warn him, but it was too late. He came home to find his belongings packed into boxes on the porch, the locks already changed. The custody evaluation started immediately. I had to name a primary residence, a decision that felt like betrayal no matter what I chose. The evaluator, a woman with weary eyes and a soft voice, told me there were no wrong answers. I chose Mom. I regretted it the second I saw Dad's face collapse during mediation. He looked 10 years older in 10 seconds. Tessa texted me that night. I chose Dad, too. It was our first direct message in weeks. We bonded again through the awful symmetry of being forced to choose sides in a war we didn't start. We started texting regularly after that, comparing notes on our parents' behavior, making each other laugh at the absurdity of it all. It was a dark kind of humor, but it helped. Dr. Marlene's license was officially suspended pending the full investigation. Both families felt the financial hit immediately. Mom started cutting coupons, something she'd never done before. Dad ate instant noodles in his apartment. The Marlenes listed their vacation home. The lives we all thought were stable vanished like fog in sunlight. I got a job at the local pizza place to help with bills. The work was simple, answering phones, boxing orders, wiping down sticky tables, but it gave me a sense of control, a break from the chaos. My manager, a college student named Daniel, knew a bit about what was happening and let me take extra shifts whenever I needed an escape. 3 weeks in, Dad walked in with Dr. Marlene, date night, like nothing had ever happened. They sat in a corner booth, sharing a large pepperoni and laughing at some private joke. My hands trembled as I took their order, but I stayed composed. I served their pizza with a smile that felt like shards of glass in my mouth. When Dad recognized me behind the counter, something in his face cracked. He left a 50 tip on a 20 meal. I donated it to the animal shelter. My coworker Lena posted about the encounter on TikTok without asking. "You won't believe what just happened at work." She captioned the video of me delivering pizza to my dad and his therapist-turned-girlfriend. It hit 10,000 views overnight. The comment section exploded with opinions from strangers dissecting our lives. Both families scrambled to contain the fallout, but the internet had already decided who the villains were. Tessa and I met up at our old playground, the one where we first learned how to pump our legs on the swings, where we used to skin our knees and tell each other secrets. We agreed our friendship might be the only thing left worth saving. We made a pact to stay in touch no matter what, using burner phones bought with my pizza money. It felt like we were spies living inside our own story. My grades started slipping. The early admission to my dream school was now in danger. Mom found my report card and broke down completely. She blamed herself for focusing too much on revenge, for not noticing that I was drowning. I ended up comforting her. She sobbed into my arms, whispering apologies while I rubbed her back and told her it wasn't all her fault. The role reversal was complete. I had become the parent. She, the child. Then the jewelry store photo surfaced. It spread through school like wildfire. Daniel showed me the screenshot during a shift. Dad and Dr. Marlene standing at a display case, looking at engagement rings. Barely 6 months after filing for divorce. My hands went numb around the order pad. That night I dropped 3 pizzas in the kitchen. Each one splattered on the floor like the mess in my chest. Mom found out through the parent WhatsApp group. She locked herself in the bathroom and turned on the shower to muffle her screams. I sat on the hallway floor for an hour, listening to rage and water collide. When she finally came out, her face was blank. She walked past me silently and started shredding old photo albums in the living room. I couldn't understand how Dad could show up at my job with the woman who blew up our lives, then try to patch it all up with a 50 tip. That jewelry store photo made me question everything. What if this wasn't accidental? What if they'd been planning this all along? Then came the alienation of affection lawsuit. Mr. Marlene had Dad served at his apartment complex during dinner with Dr. Marlene. I heard about it from a classmate whose dad lived in the same building. Dad called Mom 17 times that night, begging her to talk to Mr. Marlene, pleading with her to stop it. She turned off her phone, and we watched cooking shows until 3 a.m., not really watching, just sitting in the blue flicker of the TV, too numb to talk. The deposition notice came for me on a Tuesday. I had to testify about our family before the affair, describe birthdays, holidays, and vacations under oath, like I was presenting evidence from someone else's life. The lawyer's office smelled like stale coffee, old leather, and slow disappointment. I sat in that conference room for 3 hours, trying to answer questions about a marriage that now felt like fiction. Every happy memory was cross-examined. Tessa's deposition happened the same week. We weren't supposed to discuss what we said, but we met at the library anyway. She told me that Dr. Marlene had confessed her feelings for my dad to Mr. Marlene months ago. He had begged her to refer Dad to someone else. She refused, saying she could maintain boundaries. But the truth was, their marriage had already been stretched thin. Her long hours, the emotional energy she poured into clients, they were unraveling too. Our testimonies painted a picture we didn't want to see. 2 marriages already falling apart, using an affair as the final push to collapse. My parents hadn't been happy in years. Tessa's parents had been sleeping in separate rooms since before Dad's first therapy session. We'd been the glue holding the illusion together. And even we couldn't hold any more. The judge ordered family therapy as part of the custody ruling. The irony hung heavy in the room. Therapy had been the thing that shattered everything. Now it was being prescribed to fix it. The court-appointed therapist was a soft-spoken man who couldn't stop adjusting his glasses. He tried to manage Mom's seething anger and Dad's shaky remorse while I sat between them like some sort of trauma translator. It didn't work. Tessa and I made our own recovery plan. We met every Thursday at the library, officially to study for finals. In reality, we processed the storm behind the biography shelves. We kept a shared Google Doc with coping strategies, everything from breathing exercises to fake texts we could send each other to escape tense family dinners. Prom season arrived with its usual glitter and dread. The school required parent signatures for tickets. Mom signed mine while muttering about Dad probably chaperoning with his girlfriend. She was right. The volunteer list included both Dad and Dr. Marlene. I didn't go. Instead, Tessa and I brought snacks and watched movies on her laptop in the park pavilion. It rained halfway through Mean Girls. We stayed anyway. The court date landed on what would have been my parents' 20th wedding anniversary. Mom wore her wedding dress out of spite. Dad arrived holding Dr. Marlene's hand. She waited in the hallway until the bailiff asked her to leave. The judge looked exhausted before we'd even started. I testified that I wanted relationships with both parents, even after everything. The words came out dry. Mom squeezed my hand so hard it left dents. Dad kept clearing his throat like the truth was stuck there. The judge asked if I felt safe with both of them. I said yes, though safe felt like a word from another life. We got joint custody, a rotating schedule of alternating weeks, split holidays, and forced smiles at school events. Nobody was happy. Co-parenting classes were mandated. Another legal irony that made Mom laugh until she cried in the parking lot. We joked we'd need a spreadsheet to manage my new life. Everything reduced to drop-offs, calendar alerts, and detailed pickup plans. Dr. Marlene took a plea deal with the therapy board, 2-year license suspension, mandatory ethics retraining, supervised sessions when she returned. Dad stood beside her at the hearing, holding her hand like he was proud. Mom sat in the back row, arms crossed, eyes sharp, watching the collapse like it was her personal courtroom drama. Both houses were listed for sale to split assets. I packed my childhood into boxes, every memory stained with what came after. The pencil marks on the bedroom wall tracking my height, the kitchen table where we'd eaten pancakes every Saturday, the worn-out couch where we watched The Princess Bride 100 times. All of it was priced and labeled for a moving sale. While packing, I found our photo albums. One picture stopped me cold, our beach trip from 2 years ago. Everyone smiling, all sunburned and sandy, pretending like nothing was wrong. Dad had his arm around Mom. Tessa and I were building sandcastles. Dr. and Mr. Marlene shared a beach umbrella. It was the last time we'd all been together happy, or at least pretending well enough to fool the camera. We loaded the boxes into Daniel's borrowed pickup while our parents stood on opposite driveways, pointedly ignoring each other like strangers who just happened to live on the same street. Her presence made it bearable proof that something good had survived the wreckage. We'd salvaged our friendship from the selfishness of the people who were supposed to protect us. Graduation crept closer, complete with military-level seating charts. The school sent out detailed maps to keep families apart. Mom was assigned the left bleachers, Dad the right. The Marlenes were given the back row. I was allowed 4 tickets too for each parent. No flexibility. The ceremony, which should have been a celebration, turned into another logistical nightmare. My valedictorian speech took 3 drafts. The first version was too bitter, the second too full of grief. The third struck a fragile balance between truth and diplomacy. I talked about resilience, about how sometimes we choose our family, about how honesty hurts but heals. The principal approved it with a visible exhale, relieved I hadn't used my platform to expose everyone. News of an anonymous donation reached me through Daniel, my manager at the pizza shop. Someone had overheard him talking about my college situation and paid my deposit in full. The note attached simply said they believed in supporting young people who'd endured family hardship. I cried in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of garlic and the sudden possibility of a future. Tessa's family received similar support from a fund started by our English teacher, Ms. Ray. She'd seen right through our Julius Caesar metaphors and understood the pain underneath. Small-town gossip had gutted us, but small-town kindness was trying to rebuild what it could. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Enough to keep going. The last day of school came with its own minefields. Yearbook signing turned into a game of strategic evasion. Tessa and I met up afterward at our old elementary school playground. We sat on the same swings where we'd first become friends, promising that distance wouldn't undo what divorce, scandal, and public shame couldn't break. Geography couldn't fracture what we'd reforged by hand. The moving trucks pulled in on the same morning. 2 homes, once close enough to borrow sugar, now being dismantled in parallel. Mom had found a condo across town. Dad was moving in with Dr. Marlene. The Marlenes were downsizing too. Everyone scattering like debris from the same explosion. I loaded the final box into Daniel's borrowed truck just as Tessa walked over from her driveway. We hugged in the middle of the street, between our former homes, holding on like survivors of the same shipwreck. Our parents watched from their cars, probably wanting to stop us, but knowing they'd long since lost that right, we had claimed our friendship back. On our terms. The drive to college took 4 hours. Mom drove while I handled navigation. We both pretended the empty passenger seat didn't feel like a ghost. Dad texted about visiting after I got settled. Dr. Marlene had added a heart emoji to the message. I ignored it. The highway stretched ahead, open and uncertain, but it was mine. Tessa texted from her own road trip. We survived. I replied, somehow stronger for it. Our friendship had been forged in fire and tempered by betrayal. We had watched the consequences of deception up close, felt them scorch our skin. In our futures, we'd choose truth. Not because it was easy, but because we'd seen the cost of lies. That cost had been everything. Maybe that made the lesson worth learning. My dorm room was small, quiet, and perfect. No history, no baggage, just blank walls and fresh air. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, every object a decision about what to carry forward. A photo of Tessa and me at age 7 made it to the desk. The rest stayed boxed. Mom helped me set up. We both pretended not to notice how wrong it felt that Dad wasn't there. She hugged me goodbye in the parking lot. Her tears weren't frantic like before. They were quieter now, sad, but clear. We'd both learned to cry without drowning. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. A message waited. A A selfie from Tessa, exhausted but genuinely smiling in her own dorm. No fake cheer, no polite masking, just survival and maybe a little hope. We video called until midnight, compared schedules, traded stories, planned visits. We were building something new. Honest. Ours. The next morning brought new people, new possibilities, new everything. I walked to orientation thinking about choices, about how truth costs something, but lies cost more. My parents had given me a perfect example of what not to do. I would do better. We would. Now it was up to me to figure out the rest, but I had Tessa, and we had the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Like the video if you want more stories like this.